Hi, good afternoon. Welcome to the Libraries Connecting Texas July webinar. We have a lot on tap today. For those of you who are listening to the recording, there is no live chat option, obviously, so just give us an email or give us a call if there's anything that we talk about today and you've got some questions. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Caroline Wolf.
Hi, I'm Caroline Wolf. I am in the Baton Rouge office, and I'm going to introduce a couple of people on the call. Of course, Mel's already introduced herself, and she is in the North Carolina office. And we have Charles Thacker, who is joining us from the New Mexico office. Charles is going to give us a great talk on bandwidth and how to determine what bandwidth you need and in your library. We're going to start with our agenda, which we sent out in our newsletter. Mel, do you want to talk about the funding to date?
Yeah, I'd be happy to. So funding commitments continue right along. We have a small list of libraries who are still awaiting their funding commitment, but overall, we've seen $857,000 in commitments. Of course, the bulk of that is with the internet access, because that is the focus of Libraries Connecting Texas program. The few of you, let me make this a little bit bigger. So we do have a few of you still outstanding. These application statuses are current as of Tuesday. So generally, if they are assigned to IR, that's assigned to initial review. QA review is quality assurance review. Final review, yet another level of PIA review. Application wave ready, so Camp Wood, we do expect when it hits this status that you will see funding in this next wave. Same with Dustin Michael Sekula Memorial Library. We've got our fingers crossed. We should see a funding wave later on today. Of course, the big outstanding dollar amount, City of Dallas Consortium, with the $1.5 million. They did file a Category 1 and a Category 2 application. But for our smaller rural libraries, we are getting very, very close.
That's really exciting. You know, sometimes during this call, I see funding come through while we're on the call. So it'd be really exciting if those two get their funding commitments while we're having the webinar. So right now, what you should be thinking about, if you haven't been funded yet, you should be thinking about responding to any requests from PIA for information. That's going to come in the form of an email, and it'll have a link in it to a question in EPC. And we are also monitoring it, but it's always a good idea to try to log in and see if you can answer the question on your own, and we'll be happy to help you with the response. If you need help, or look over the response you've composed before you upload it into Epic. If you haven't invoiced USAC for your discounts in 2018, we've been contacting you. Jennifer has been really working hard to contact you to make sure that you have the forms in place so that you can file a BEAR form, and we've sent out a couple of emails. Mel, did you want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, just be aware, those of you who have been participating in E-rate prior to the current 2019 year, you have until October 28th this year to complete all invoicing. Whether you have paid those bills in full and now need to file for reimbursement, or you've just been paying a discounted amount each month, the service provider is also under that October 28th deadline. So we're monitoring it, but ultimately it is your responsibility to ensure that either you meet that deadline for filing for reimbursement or that service provider meets the deadline for invoicing USAC. So we'll continue to follow up more specifically with you if we are not seeing any disbursements happening on those 2018 FRNs.
And if you wanted to do the SPI process and you haven't received discounts on your bill, then you probably should go ahead and file a BEAR. I talked to someone last week who got an email from me because I sent out an email saying, well, you don't have an invoice mode set, so you probably should file a BEAR. And she said, well, the service provider has been applying discounts to my bill. So the service provider may just be planning on invoicing at a later time, but since the funding year has closed, it's probably a good idea to touch base with them just to make sure that they are going to invoice for, your discounts if you had planned on using the SPI method. And it's just kind of ironic, but the 486 for 2019 is due almost exactly the same date as the invoices are due for 2018, and that has to do with the 120-day period between the end of services and the deadline to invoice. So if you haven't filed the 486, I think everybody has filed the 486 who's been funded. There may be one person who hasn't, but we're really excited because last year I remember we had to remind a lot of people, and this year everyone's been on the ball. I'm really excited about that.
Yeah. So the other thing we want you to be thinking about now, after July 1st, anytime after July 1st, you can post an FCC Form 470 seeking bids for services for the 2020-2021 funding year. That sounds so far away, and it does feel like we just finished this process. In fact, I had that same conversation with the director this week. She's like, didn't we just finish? Yes, but guess what? Now we can get ahead of the game and be early. And our goal for you is to have your Form 470 posted, have you run your minimum 28-day procurement period, and be done with your bid evaluations well before the Christmas holiday. So now is the time for us to start thinking about what services you need to seek for next year. The people who are going to have to file a Form 470 are those who are just in a month-to-month or a 12-month internet access contract, or it could be a multi-year contract that the contract actually expires June 30th, 2020. So if you're going to be out of contract or you don't have contract for services that go through the end of 2021, you will have to post a Form 470. Now, Caroline, earlier this week, you sent out an email directly to them talking about a really neat opportunity we have to help you with your 470s this year. We're going to talk about that in just a little bit.
That's right. And we're really excited that USAC is going to be conducting one of their national trainings in Farmers Branch, Texas. And I looked yesterday, and that training is not full yet. So if y'all are in the Farmers Branch area, I definitely recommend that you try to attend that training. You can actually ask questions and get some really good information about what to expect for the 2020 funding year. So it's really an interesting experience if you haven't attended one of those trainings yet. So September 23rd and 24th. The 23rd is the beginners training, and then the 24th is for everyone. So if you would like to attend the beginners training, you should probably plan on going on both dates. But definitely consider it if you haven't been aware of it yet. We've put the link to how to register for the training in this agenda. So you should be able to just follow that and sign up for it.
Yeah. And we did hear from Henry Stokes at Texas State Library. He will be attending this training, as well as Jennifer Raby from the LCT team. And Caroline, I think you were thinking about attending as well. So E-Rate Central is going to have, we're going to have some attendance there. So if you've got questions or just want to meet Jennifer face-to-face and potentially Caroline, that is your opportunity. So I hinted earlier, and here it is, we are hosting 4 webinar workshops specifically to help you file your Form 470. So the intention is for you to file along with us during that hour. Generally, if you're going to post a Form 470, it's a fairly simple, short form. Shouldn't take more than 30 minutes. We've allotted for an hour on these 4 dates to be able to handle your specific questions. We want this to be personalized. Just so we know who's planning to attend what date, Caroline sent out an email with the newsletter earlier this week that gave you the links to register. We want you to register for these through Eventbrite, so we've got an idea who's going to attend. We can pull some of your personal data and have that handy. But in advance of that, what we need you to know is what your current internet bandwidth is, whether or not you need to increase your bandwidth for the upcoming year, and whether or not you're seeking services for your bookmobile. You may or may not know that the wireless internet to your hotspots are eligible when they're used on a library bookmobile. So have that information in hand and plan to join us one of these 4 days. Caroline's going to take 2 of them. I'm going to take 2 of them, and we are going to walk you through that process with the intention of having that 470 done. So, and we'll talk about what the 470 is and what the important timelines are and the dates. Set your benchmarks for when your bids close and whether or not you want to have a question and answer period and so forth and so on. So, which is a nice segue into Charles. We're going to have Charles give us an idea of how do I know how much bandwidth I need. So let me pull up your slides, Charles.
Thank you.
All right, you've got control.
Thank you. My name is Charles Thacker, and I am new with E-Rate Central as of July 1, but I have spent the last 25 years in New Mexico public education, and I was formerly the Executive Director of Technology for Farmington Municipal Schools. So I've dealt with technology quite extensively on quite a large scale for our school district, and I'm happy to be here and help out with any understanding we can provide on bandwidth and how to understand it. The motto of there's never enough time or money for anything, you can start including bandwidth with that. I think pretty much everywhere we go, we always feel like we're restricted a little bit on what we can access and how we access it. And that's something that as a society in the United States, we've grown to expect anytime, anywhere, to anything access. And our public libraries are no different in that regard. And I know that in our area, a lot of people use the public library to gain access to the internet and to resources. And it's a awesome opportunity for people to be able to have that access. And I want to see that grow, and I encourage everyone to be able to provide that. But you have to have some understanding of what it is that you're requesting and what you need. I'll go through this and talk a little bit about an analogy to speed and cars and driving, because I like to use analogies a lot, and anybody who ends up working with me will realize that fairly quickly. But really, it follows a fairly simple concept of if you're hearing complaints, then you probably don't have enough bandwidth. And it's fairly simple to measure that, because you're going to know if your system is running a little bit slow and you can't get your job done. And if you have patrons who are saying that they can't do work that they're trying to complete online, then there may be an issue with the network. And oftentimes that is a bandwidth restriction or a bandwidth problem. So understanding bandwidth in general, and we'll see if the slide will progress for me here. One more click. There we go. I like to think of a water pipe. So think of a garden hose going to another garden hose or to another pipe system. And this is the flow of data. This is the flow of information. That water is your information. And the smallest part of that pipe is going to be your restrictive portion. That's going to be what makes access to data more difficult. So even if you have bigger pipes later on, the smallest pipe is what impacts that. And I'm going to put numbers on this slide, but you don't have to worry about what those numbers represent. If they're kilobytes, megabytes, I've had people call them bigabytes. It doesn't matter what you call them. Those could be anything. And I like to think of just miles per hour, because that's something we all understand. If you're driving your car and we say you're going a certain speed, that's a mile per hour, and we understand that. The higher the number, the faster you're going. I'm not going to recommend that you're driving at 54 miles an hour all the time, or you connect to another pipe at 100 miles an hour. I'm not recommending we drive that way, but our internet traffic does operate like that, and we get to some really high speeds. And if you have a pipe connecting to a pipe, and maybe it goes from a smaller number to a larger number to an even larger number, very large, but if it comes back down to a smaller number, ultimately, at the end, what you have is a speed that equals the very smallest portion of that pipe. So if the smallest portion of your pipe is 54, then that's the speed you're connecting to the internet, no matter what any other section of that pipe looks like. And so if we translate this to your computers that may be talking to your network, and so the computer's up on the top left, the network is down below and a little switch, and maybe you're connected at any of these numbers, and you're connected with a cable, and maybe you have wireless connections as well in your environment, in your library. Could be tablets, could be phones, could be computers. They're all connecting to your network, but what is that last line? What is the line between the switch and the internet? That needs to be as big as you can, because you don't want this pipe right here between you and the rest of the information in the world to be the choke point. You don't want that to be the smallest portion of your network. You want to be able to push as far out as you can, as high as you can. So we'll look at some metrics you might be able to use based on numbers of computers you have, numbers of patrons that you have coming in, how many circulation stations do you have. All of those things will come into the mix, but really just fall back on the concept of, are you having problems leveraging your system in order to manage your business, your day-to-day work that you need to do for your system? And are you hearing complaints from patrons, from people coming in and saying that it's slow, they can't access information, something times out, web pages don't load? I don't know if you have many patrons who are using streaming content. I know in Farmington we had several people that would come in and they would utilize the computers to access streaming content, videos. In fact, if you're watching this video later on YouTube, you are streaming content. And that is something that's going to take up a lot of bandwidth. Motion video, full motion video and audio take up a lot of bandwidth, and they require a high speed. So if you're hearing complaints, then that's when you need to start looking at how big is our internet connection, and can we make it a little bit bigger? Now, can we do that affordably? This is where Mel and Caroline can definitely talk about being able to do extended contracts. You can do multi-year contracts, and that can help reduce the cost over time for your bandwidth. And of course, the competitive bidding process of filing for all of this really encourages your service providers to compete against each other and come up with the best cost, because they want your business. So they're going to try to reduce their cost and provide as much speed as they can in the process.
Charles,
yes.
I'm sorry, I don't want to interrupt
Please,
you.
no, ask any question.
So you, I think, are in a really good position to answer this question. Many of these libraries are in rural, remote areas that only have maybe one service provider. Do you have any advice for them on how to handle that kind of a situation? I think, you know, as someone in a rural area, you may be able to give them some pointers.
One of the difficulties that you will find in the rural area is a lack of options. Right, and so that means that your competitive base is very small. You don't have a lot of people coming in that are willing to invest in the infrastructure to build out something, because they don't see the return on investment for their company. And that's unfortunate, and it's a problem that all rural areas deal with and they all face. I think this is an opportunity to have good conversations with those local providers. If they have a footprint in your area, it's likely that they have some other presence there, they have some other commitment, and they put some money into their infrastructure there. And sometimes just having an actual conversation with those people can be very beneficial, to talk about your needs and to try and make it a human issue, and not so much a business proposition, but more of a human issue, and describe, we have a community and we have people who use our library and they care about our library and they want to be able to have access, and we need to be able to provide them a service that they feel good about. And the more we do that, the more the name of that provider sounds good. So when people start talking about, oh yeah, I go to the library and I use it because we have XYZ service provider there and they provide excellent internet service, I think they're great. Now that word of mouth in a rural area is very important, and it really spreads. And so that can help that service provider realize that maybe there's extra business opportunity there, and maybe if they can provide a good service at a competitive cost, that they're going to get really good PR. It's almost like free advertising at that point. The library is already paying for the internet bandwidth, so why not make it something that is very positive, people are happy to have and happy to pay for? That's good positive advertising that the rest of the community will be aware of. And so sometimes those communications and those conversations are necessary, and they're a good idea to have. Now, alternatively, there are opportunities to look at other providers that may be nearby that haven't made a point of location in your community just yet, but maybe they're willing to. Maybe they're willing to because they're going to be able to take that business from someone else who's not providing the service at a cost that works for the library. And so having those conversations again with nearby providers might be very important, and let them know we have a need and we're willing to pay for it if you can provide us a good service. And you may find that other people will do that.
I think that's a really good point there, because I have heard many times before someone say, I talked to my service provider and they told me they can only provide me X. So that's what I'm putting on my 470. So, I think it's important to ask for what you need and room for growth. And then, then service providers that might be nearby might be more interested in responding, and I think that's a really good point.
And I don't ever recommend that someone set a goal and what they're advertising that they need as what they need today. That's really short-sighted, because your needs are only going to go up. There most likely is not going to be a decrease in how much bandwidth you need. Remember what I said, right? That you never have enough time, money, and bandwidth. And that means that it's constantly growing. And it used to be, yes, a nice little small modem dial-up connection was great for everything you needed at your house. And now very few people could survive on that, mainly because we have these high expectations that we should have the bandwidth that I can stream all the videos and movies that I want off of my Netflix. And if I can't have that, I'm going to find somebody who can provide it. And service providers know this. They know that people will shop around. I think maybe they think that residential customers are more willing to shop around, and so there's a little more competition and they might focus there. But if they're aware that a library and other public institutions are willing to shop around, and they're willing to say, well, maybe 10 megabits works for my internet now, but I know I want 100, or maybe 100 works now, but I know I want 1,000. Shoot for the 1,000, because you may have a service provider who says, if we build this in and we provide the service now and we put the upfront cost in, we're now able to provision internet access not just to the library. Now we're provisioning internet access to the community, because we've built some infrastructure there. And now I can start picking up other businesses as business, and I can pick up other residential customers as business. And so those service providers might see it as a very good business case. And perhaps a library is a great opportunity to kind of be that open door, right? Open the door to the community and say, come work with us, provide us this bandwidth, and we're going to talk about how great and wonderful you are to everybody that comes through our library. And maybe if you can provide home service and other business service, now you're going to start getting more customers. And that might be good to do, and to share that with other competitive service providers in the area, even if they're not local right in your community, if they're somewhere nearby.
Great.
So continuing with that analogy, and it's just a kind of a reinforcement of the idea that you want to have as much capacity and bandwidth as you can, because newer devices are coming online. And so going with my car analogy, what I refer to oftentimes with people who acquire a bunch of awesome technology, but they don't build the infrastructure to support it, is like having sports cars on dirt roads. They look pretty, they're awesome, they drive fast, if they have the right kind of road. But if they don't have the right kind of road, that car is no good. It doesn't drive fast, it's not that fun to drive, and it's a little bit of a frustration. So you could have brand new computers, brand new phones, they're all very high speed, but they're running on systems that can't handle their speed. And so you get these high-speed devices on slow networks, and that is just an easy formula for these fast cars on bad roads, which will result in lost confidence. And unfortunately, what you don't want is you don't want your staff and you don't want your patrons, your visitors, to be complaining and viewing the system as it's no good. We just spent a bunch of money on new computers, it's no good. It's not the computer that's at fault. It's not the phone that is at fault. It's the fact that the network can't handle these brand new devices. And so you build the infrastructure, and then those fast devices, they run like a sports car on a highway. And a highway is a great example of something to think about as well. The bigger the highway, the more cars you can have on at the exact same time going faster. If you have a one-lane road, you've got one little line of traffic, nobody can pass, and everybody has to go at that same little speed. But when you have a highway with multiple lanes, you can have fast traffic, you can have slow traffic, and everybody can get along. Now, I don't know how the drivers are in Texas. In New Mexico, there's a lot of question about that, so it may not be the best analogy in that regard.
Well, if anybody's driven through Houston or Dallas at 5 o'clock in the afternoon, I can tell you.
We won't use those as examples. So let's use a nice, a pleasant area, right? People who get along and they have a nice big road and they share the road well, and now you have fast traffic, slow traffic, everybody getting along, there's fast vehicles, slow vehicles, and they can work because the infrastructure, that bandwidth, is appropriate to handle all of that traffic. And I know I didn't say it at the beginning, but as you know, as Carolyn jumped in, welcome any questions, comments, concerns. I normally end that with questions, comments, criticisms, but that's when I'm dealing with my staff. And so in this case, please, I welcome any input, any inquiries, anything that you might think you might need assistance with. My email is on here if you'd like to contact me. Obviously, you know Mel and Caroline very well, and please continue to contact them, but I'm a resource available to them as well, so they can draw me in at any time. And E-Rate Central is most definitely interested in making sure that all of your libraries are very successful with the technology that we have.
Thank you, Charles. Thank you so much for joining us. Jackie, I think you're our one librarian on today. Do you have any questions that we can answer for you about E-Rate or bandwidth or anything like that? Well, I guess not. Okay, well, we will be making this recording available on YouTube so other people will be able to see it as well. And also, if you have any questions, feel free to email us at lct@eratecentral.com. Mel has some really interesting things to share with you about our LCT survey. I'm so excited about the feedback that we got. Thank you so much for everyone who did participate. I know that it was probably annoying having me ask over and over again for you to participate, but we did get some great results, and Mel's going to present them now.
Yeah, thanks, Caroline. Agreed. Kudos to you for turning out and answering our 9 questions on our survey. We do plan to turn this information in to the Texas State Library, to Henry and his team there, just to share the results. Some of the comments are just unbelievable. How much the E-Rate program has made an impact on your library, or the increased bandwidth that Charles just talked about has now allowed you to increase the number of patrons that are coming to the library and all that. So it's really about the stories. But for today's purpose, we're just going to give you the stats. But I'm giving you the super librarian because you guys are super for turning out and taking care of that survey. This shows we had 59 respondents. If you look down in the lower right-hand corner, we've since had a couple additional people respond throughout the week. But the number one question was, have you participated in the E-Rate program prior to the current funding year? The majority of the people, almost 75% of you, said no, you had not. And so a lot of new participants to the E-Rate program, and that is one of the goals of the LCT program, is to bring new libraries to be able to reap the federal funding that's out there and available for you. So about 25% of you had successfully participated in E-Rate previously, maybe not in 2018, but at some time in the past. I know a lot of libraries, when voice services were eligible for E-Rate funding, would participate just for the voice piece. And then as support for voice phased down, so did some library support or library participation. Oh, so you're not seeing my screen, Caroline?
No, it showed that 75% had participated, and that.
Oh. Sorry, I'm sorry. Yep, absolutely.
Sorry.
Yes, 75. Okay. Yes, green on top. Thank you. So, okay, so would your library apply for E-rate funding without the library's Connecting Texas program and the free consulting service? This was kind of a mixed bag because the overwhelming number had previously participated. They said that yes, most likely we would, just because of the benefits of the funding. They may not do it willingly, may not be happy, it may not be as easy for them, but they would probably continue to participate because now they've come to expect the federal funding and the discounted bandwidth. A lot of people said no, almost 60% of you said no, you wouldn't, just because of the complexity of the program. Our hope over the next couple of years working with you is to really decrease the number of no's to yeses. Our goal is to teach you essentially how to fish for yourself, how to apply for this program. We want to simplify it for you, give you all of the tools that you can take to be successful. Just about everything that we send you includes step-by-step instructions, and we give you a lot of reminders on the timelines and all that. So one of our personal goals, and I know from the Texas State Library, is to turn those no's around and make it just an overwhelmingly yes. So some of the comments here that were found underneath that program just kind of point to the fact that, yeah, it was a lot easier to have the assistance. The first one, she's been applying since 2012. They absolutely need it to be able to pay for their bandwidth, but it's a lot easier with the help. And we are a very good phone a friend also. The second quote, with the LCT program, it was easy and I don't have to worry about making mistakes. The third one, this is one that was unsure whether or not they would apply, without the free help. Probably not on her own, she said, but I'd look into the cost of paying for my own consultant. And then the last one is just too daunting to figure out. We want to try and break down the walls to make it a little bit easier so it's not quite so daunting for you. So next question, do you participate in our monthly E-rate conference calls? This was kind of spread out across the board. They do try and listen. A lot of them said, we tried, but we're busy at that time. So we understand, which is why we make sure and record these and send these out. And we did have some comments that pointed to that, yes, I don't have time to watch the live webinar, but I will watch the recording when I have time. So.
And if that's not a good time, that's something else that we're open to changing if another time of day is a better time. So definitely, if that would be a better thing, then definitely reach out to us and we can change the time that we host our webinar.
Yep, we do it for you, not for us. So we want to get the majority of participants. So if morning is better or a different day of the week is better, please let us know. We were really surprised by the answer to this question. Do you watch or do you read the weekly newsletter? We can tell, yes, you are. Caroline sends that out generally every Tuesday. And just like this week, she had a couple other attachments of E-rate specific upcoming events. So they are important to at least peruse and see what's in there. Sometimes it may not be pertinent to you, and it depends on how deep in the weeds you want to get. We can brag, though, that the folks at the FCC and at USAC also read the E-rate Central newsletter. So it's widely read. There's a lot of great information, and we're happy to explain anything. But we were really tickled to see almost 78% of you read those newsletters that Caroline sends out. Next question. So in 2020, do you plan to file? We're really happy to see this. Kind of disappointed with the few that said no, and so I want to reach out to those few and find out what their situations are as to why they may not choose to participate for the upcoming year. It could be a lot of reasons why, but just some insight. We don't have a contract renewal yet, but we are working with the Texas State Library to do a 2-year extension on our contract. So we are moving forward as if we are going to be here for another 2 years, and we are on the same timeline as we were last year as far as starting to file the Forms 470 and working on your invoicing. So it looks like we are not going anywhere. So hopefully those that said no are going to change their mind.
Or else.
Or else Henry's going to twist your arm. No. So I did provide some of the quotes. This was my favorite question to read, all of the quotes, and we had almost everybody who answered the survey had put something in here for us to read. So Henry and his team are going to get all of the comments. I just put in short little blips, but the majority of them have to do with the huge increase in the bandwidth at virtually the same dollar amount out of pocket or even less. So that first library went from 12 meg up to 100 meg, and they're paying nothing more out of pocket. In fact, the first year of LCT participation, they're saving all of that money because of the state stipend, which is a huge benefit to those libraries, increasing and meeting the LCT bandwidth expectations. So, and that's one thing we didn't talk about, but both the FCC and the Libraries Connecting Texas program has the benchmarks of 100 megabits per second for libraries supporting a population area of 50,000 or less people, and then for those more urban areas supporting over 50,000 people, their targeted bandwidth is a gig. There are a lot of reasons why some of the more rural libraries can't get to that 100 megs, but just realize that's what we're striving for. And through the help of the E-rate program and the competitive bidding process and all of the same issues that Charles talked about earlier about building that competition or reaching out to your existing provider has been in place, has been successful for a lot of you. So it's really fun to see your story. And I know that Henry particularly really enjoys the stories too. This was just for our benefit. Tell us how we did. Our average score was 4.9, so thank you. We absolutely love working with the Texas libraries. Each and every one of you bring your own set of challenges that we as problem solvers really enjoy. You have such great attitudes, such a willingness to learn, and we are excited to be able to continue to work with you for the next 2 years.
Thank you, Mel, and thank you for the great comments.
Yeah, exactly. Just so you have an idea of what to expect for this upcoming year, we talked about our Come File With Us web-based webinars. We want to help you learn how to file your forms and make it as painless as possible. So we're going to start with the Form 470, and we're going to carry it all the way through the 471 application. And then once you're funded, how to file the 486. And we'll help you through your PIA review as well. So watch for future Come File With Me. As always, we'll continue with the helpful email reminders, our step-by-step instructions. Of course, you've got our hotline number, and you have our LCT direct email address like Caroline was telling you earlier. So thanks again for all of you who did help fill out this survey.
Yes, thank you. And thanks, Charles, for participating in our webinar today and telling us about bandwidth. And thanks, Jackie, for attending. So I think we have come to the end. Well, we're going to be putting this video on YouTube, and I'm going to be sending out the link with the newsletter next week. So we look forward to getting some feedback from you if you have any questions, or if you want to learn more about how to figure out what bandwidth you need. You can give us a call. So with that, we'll close the call.
Thanks, Caroline. Thanks, Charles. We'll see you guys next month.
Bye.